Another rough night for the Giants offense. They just couldn't score enough runs to win this game. And it's been like that for more than 6 weeks. The Giants have been the worst offensive team in baseball. It's getting to the point where it's feeling dire in a way and hopeless in a way offensively. But it is with great relief and pleasure that I inform you I did a little digging, and while they've not been good, they've also been the unluckiest team offensively in baseball during this stretch.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're listening. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, another rough night for the Giants offense. They made Shohei Otani work. Shohei Otani was not sharp in this game, and yet, when all was said and done, they only managed to score one run again. I have gone back, I have talked on and on about the Giants' offensive struggles, and I don't really want to dwell on it anymore, but they're kind of forcing us to. So, it was about time. I actually this is not something I do often, where I look at expected numbers on the season. With StatCast, we have the expected numbers for every ball that's put in play, right? And it's not just about batting average. The weighted on base average, basically how it tells you when a ball is hit, what the results kind of should have been. And if it gets caught and it has a high probability of being a double or homer or whatever, like the ball Joc Pederson hit the other night that was robbed over the fence. It's not about direction. I'm going to be clear about this. They have decided not to factor in the direction that you hit it. It's about the launch angle and the exit velocity, kind of considering that it's kind of random where, as a hitter, yeah, you can kind of go up there with an idea. I want to pull it. I want to go the other way. I want to stay up the middle. But a lot of the time you don't really have control over where it ends up going. You react and the ball goes where it goes based on the timing of your swing. And so anyway, the expected numbers are valuable and they're predictive, and it's definitely worth looking at. And on the season, I don't actually have those numbers pulled up. I'm more interested in starting at June 25th. Now, I've talked about June 18th before, but June 25th is when they actually started to struggle. They had recently finished off their 10-game winning streak. They had lost for the first time, after the 10-game winning streak on June 22nd. And then they won the next two games, but then they lost 5-2 to the D-backs, and then they went on the road and played the Blue Jays and the Mets. So it was the game before that road trip. And yeah, so during that span, the San Francisco Giants have a 272 weighted on base average, which is the lowest by far in the major leagues over that span. 272. The next closest team is the Oakland A's at 296. And just a word about weighted on base average, it is always scaled so that the league average weighted on base average is equal to the league average on base percentage. So it's easier to kind of conceptualize. So if you have a league average weighted on base average, then if you know what the league average on base percentage is, then you know what the league average weighted on base average is. And so if you're above it or below it or whatever, you can kind of get a baseline for what's average. So 272 for the Giants is well below the major league average. In fact, I'm going to look over that span. The major league average, it got rid of the dates for me. I'm going to quickly let you know over that span what is the major league average weighted on base average, and it is 320, and the Giants are at 272, and so that's dreadful, obviously. And again, the next closest team at 296, and league average at 320. So the Giants about 50 points below the league average. So it's not a surprise that during that span they also have a 70 weighted runs created plus, which means 30% below average offense. And that's not good. And it's the worst in the majors over that span. And so we're talking about many, many weeks here for the Giants being the worst offensive team. So you knew all that. But what I looked at is what are the expected numbers over that span? What is the StatCast like? The quality of it basically looks at walks, strikeouts, and quality of contact. It doesn't take into account the actual results of that contact. And so, it basically can tell you really well if you're getting unlucky or if you're getting lucky. And for the Giants, I'm, like I said, relieved and pleased to inform you that they have been the unluckiest team in baseball according to, the expected numbers. Their expected weighted on base average is 306 during this span, which again is not great. The league average over the span is 320, but that's 14 points below average as opposed to 48. And so the minus 34 gap between their expected weighted on base average and their actual weighted on base average is twice the next closest team. It's last. It's the biggest gap of any team, and it's 2 times more than the next closest team, the Yankees at minus 17. And so I can kind of definitively say the Giants have been by far the unluckiest team offensively in baseball since June 25th, and it's just not close. And when you look at some of the teams, and if they had an actual weighted on base average of 306, which is again that expected weighted on base average for the Giants, some teams that are the Cleveland Guardians are at an actual 306, and that comes in with a weighted runs created plus of 93. Now, weighted runs created plus takes your home ballpark or all the ballparks you play in into account. And so the Giants play in one of the most pitcher-friendly parks around. Actually, it's changed in recent years, so I don't know exactly basically what their weighted runs created plus would be if their actual weighted on base average was 306. But the Guardians being at 93 weighted runs created plus with a 306 weighted on base average. The Tampa Bay Rays have a 307 weighted on base average, and their weighted runs created plus is 99 over that span. And so I can kind of say by looking at that the Giants would probably fall in the 95 to 100 weighted runs created plus, and 100 is league average. So even though that expected weighted on base average is below the MLB average, that's to be expected with a team that plays half its games at Oracle Park. They're going to underperform the average, even if they're then park adjusted to be average. I hope that makes sense. But basically, it's, to me, what I'm seeing here is that the Giants, the quality of contact reflects more of an average offensive team over this stretch, as opposed to the 30% below average results they've had over this span. And so that is a huge difference, and we can only hope that it kind of evens out, and that some of these balls, even in this series, they hit, even against Otani, there were some deep fly balls. Joc Pederson in the first inning, Wade hit a deep fly ball. They hit a Michael Conforto. They hit some balls well, and they're just not falling. They've hit a lot of line drives right at people in the outfield in recent days, and this backs that up. I'm not cherry picking. I posted this on Twitter with all the individual players, and to me, I'll save this for just a minute. I want to get into some of the individual players. It's kind of eye-popping what their actual results are versus what the expected results are over this span. And obviously it all adds up to them having the largest gap in the negative direction of any team by 2 times. So we'll get into some of the individual numbers in just a minute. And I also want to discuss how they're lucky to be in the position they're in, because even with this horrible result offensively for the last, whatever it is, I think it's 6.5 weeks now. What is their record? It's not that bad. We'll get into what it is in just a minute. And before we do, this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't have to be so stressful. Whether it's the Giants, whether you're thinking about playoff tickets, like I said, the Giants are in a strong position and currently likely to make the playoffs. And it's time to start thinking about that, or you're going to the theater, or you're visiting the other ballpark to watch the Giants on the road. It shouldn't have to be so stressful. And for me, it's about getting the best price. And I always stress, is it good to buy early, late, in the middle? I don't know. But with the Game Time guarantee, all of that anxiety is put to rest. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will simply credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, as promised, I want to discuss some of the individual players, and it's just stark, to look at a number of veteran players specifically, guys who are so important to the outcomes for this team, basically, and across the board, they're having bad luck. This is better than any other metric for luck, like BABIP and all that stuff. BABIP can just be you stink and you're not hitting well. But this is saying you are hitting well, maybe, but that the results just haven't been there. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to get into some mailbag questions. A lot of people have questions about how to improve the offense, some young players getting an opportunity, perhaps like Wade Meckler. So look out for that tomorrow. We have a lot left over, so no prompt, a lot left over from last time. So that'll be tomorrow. Giants will play the Rangers and Donnie Ecker's, offense and Bruce Bochy's team tomorrow, Friday at 7:15 Pacific. You can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the individual players, it's amazing. There's basically one regular player, I guess 2, but really one who's overperformed the expected numbers, and that's Wilmer Flores. It's not really a surprise given that his numbers are so great over the span. He has a 460 weighted on base average. Again, 320 is average, so you kind of get the picture. 460, clearly way better than average. And the expected numbers are at 374 for him. So that's an 86-point overperformance, but it basically ends there. Blake Sable has a positive kind of overperformance, 287 actual weighted on base, 258 expected weighted on base. But both of those numbers are below average, so it doesn't really stand out as oh, wow, he's been super unlucky or lucky. J.D. Davis has kind of got what he deserved, which is below average performance. I think that passes the eye test over the last 6 weeks. Bailey has underperformed by 30 points. I think that checks out. Think of that. He hit a deep drive in Cincinnati that I thought was going to be a homer. He hit a deep fly ball to center in San Francisco that I thought was going to be a homer. So Bailey getting a little bit unlucky checks out over this span. LaMonte Wade Jr., 298 weighted on base average, 332 expected weighted on base average. So he's been, that's a 34-point negative swing. And the actual results are well below average, and the expected results are significantly better than average. Luis Matos, I think we've seen this, right? When I look at these individual players, I can think of many balls that they hit that were caught that seemed like they had a chance. And 273 weighted on base average for Matos, 310 expected weighted on base average for Matos. Thairo Estrada, 230 weighted on base average, 268 expected. So both of those numbers well below average. That doesn't stand out to me so much as the guys who are like below average with expected numbers that are above average. Michael Conforto, 272 weighted on base average, 332 expected weighted on base average, a 60-point swing in the negative direction. And 332 would be better than average, but instead he's been like 50 points below average. Joc Pederson, 274 weighted on base average, 342 expected. And I think we've seen it from him too. He's hit a lot of balls well, including yesterday against Otani, a deep fly ball to the left field warning track, and many others. This is spanning I don't know how many plate appearances. It doesn't say. Mike Yastrzemski, 250 weighted on base average, 333 expected weighted on base average. So many guys here checking in so below average with expected numbers that are actually above average. It's shocking. That's a 83-point negative swing for Yastrzemski. Pederson, a 68-point negative swing. How about Brandon Crawford? 222 weighted on base average, 307 expected. That is a 85-point negative swing. Austin Slater, we've seen the same thing from him. He's hit some deep drives that have been caught. 266 expected, 266 actual, 352 expected. That's an 86-point swing, right up there with Crawford. Schmidt, 158 actual, 252 expected. So again, when both numbers are way below average, I kind of don't want to dwell on that. It's more the guys who are like below, way below average, but expected above average. It's crazy. So that's a bunch of veterans. Slater, Crawford, Yastrzemski, Pederson, Conforto, and Wade. But also I would throw Matos in there, even though he's not a veteran. With the below average actual and above average expected. And we're not talking a small gap. We're talking about big gaps that add up to the biggest negative difference in baseball by 2 times over the Yankees. And so I have looked at this and I have decided that this is encouraging. And look, I watch these games. I know they've looked dead, but some of these balls, like if they fall, you don't look dead anymore. You start like believing in yourselves again. I think that there's a confidence thing going on right now and just a pressing, trying to do too much, because this has been a dreadful stretch, one of the worst in my memory, especially under this new regime. I mean, they had some rough years in like 2017, but probably one of the rough, maybe 2019 or 18 or 17 to find a stretch like this. It's been that bad. So they're fortunate to be in the position that they're in. And that's what I want to get into next, because all that aside, being the worst offensive team in the majors for that stretch, guess what their record is? I'll give you a second. They've played 38 games. Okay? 38 games. They're 18-20. 18-20. 2 games under 500, despite being by far the worst offensive team in the majors over a 38-game stretch. And so that is fortunate. And not only is the record itself fortunate, but their position in the standings. It's amazing that they are where they are, in that they have, the division is slipping away. I'm kind of like being a realist here. They're 6 games back of the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are on a roll. The Dodgers have like a better run differential by almost 100 runs. They, I think, are the better team, just being a realist here, and you're already 6 games back. So that's going to be really tough. Suddenly the division seems like a remote possibility. However, in the wild card standings, the Giants have a 3-game lead on a playoff spot. And some of the teams around them have just been completely faltering. So I want to look at some of the records of these other teams over this stretch and how the Giants have gained ground somehow during this horrible 6+ weeks, what their playoff odds are. And also, one thing that hasn't been talked about with Shohei Otani, a legitimate reason, I have always thought the Giants are a legitimate possible destination for him, but there's one thing that hasn't been talked about much that I think adds to the Giants' desirability as a destination for Otani. So we will get into it in just a minute, and before we do, all right, as promised, we are going to get into some of the other teams around the Giants, like the Arizona D-backs, Diamondbacks. It's kind of weird to say that way, but what have they done over this stretch, and what are the Giants' playoff odds according to Fangraphs? Well, it looks like I may have actually closed the tab that I was planning on discussing, but the point is, the Giants over this stretch have gained ground on a lot of teams because some of these other teams in the standings near them have completely fallen flat on their face. So I've pulled it up again, and the D-backs, just to start with them over this stretch since June 25th, are 11 and 26. 11 and 26. They were in first place by a lot. They were like 16 or 17 games over 500, and now they're buried in the standings and they're under 500. So the Giants have gained all this ground on Arizona. The Cubs are 22 and 18 over the stretch, so they haven't gained a ton of ground on the Giants, honestly. The Reds 19 and 21, so that's a tiny bit of gained ground on the Giants. Marlins 16 and 22 over this stretch. Padres 18 and 20, same record as the Giants. So they've gained no ground. The Dodgers 24 and 13. There you go. That's where the Giants have fallen in those standings, obviously. And the Phillies 24 and 15, so they've gained ground, but you only have to be a playoff team, you just have to be one of the 3 wildcard teams. Obviously, you'd like to be the top wildcard team, which means you host a series. I haven't given up completely on the division, but according to Fangraphs, the playoff odds the division odds for the Giants are 4.5%. They were up around 20 not that long ago, 20%. So I buy that as realistic, 4.5%, which is to say not very realistic at all. However, the odds of simply making the postseason, according to Fangraphs, still, despite this stretch, despite losing 2 to the A's and then 2 out of 3 to the Angels, still with playoff odds of 73.5%. And I can't emphasize enough, my point is that they're fortunate to be in this position given how they've hit over the last 6+ weeks. But the reality is a lot of these other teams, there's not a lot of teams running away with great records in the National League. You've got the Dodgers leading the division. You've got the Braves running away in their division, but those teams don't factor into the wild card race. And so in the wild card race, yeah, I think the Phillies have the potential to pull away a little bit, but that's just one of the 3 teams in the wild card picture. So you just have to be 3 of the 3 teams. And right now the Giants are just 1 back of the Phillies for the top spot. They're 2.5 ahead of the Marlins for the second spot. And the Marlins are half a game over the Cubs and Reds. So the Giants hold a 3-game lead over each of those teams for a playoff spot. And the D-backs are now 5 back of the Giants. The Padres remain 7 back of the Giants. And the Mets are 9.5 back of the Giants. So it's really, the Cubs, Reds, D-backs, and Padres right now that I'm paying attention to. And obviously also the Phillies and the Marlins. And keeping an eye on the division as well. But 4.5% odds aren't very good, but 70-something% odds are quite good. So, yeah, they've just got to turn it around, and maybe they need to be told about these expected numbers and how just keep with your approach. I mean, maybe don't. Maybe shake some things up with the approach because at times it's been ugly. The strikeouts have still been too high. It's been pointed out to me that I said it would regress, and it has regressed. When I was saying that, they were up close to 40% with their strikeout rate, and now it's like 25%. So that's what I meant, but it's still high. It's still like 3rd or 4th highest in the game. But when I said it would regress, I meant, if you go back and listen, I was saying it's not going to be in the 30s and upper 30s. It's going to come down to the mid to low 20s. And unfortunately, it's been more mid-20s than low 20s. So anyway, it's just kind of a melee in the National League. As down as you want to be about the Giants right now, there's a lot of other teams that are going through worse stretches of baseball. And that has benefited the Giants to the point where they're still in a strong position despite not playing well for an extended period. So the last thing I want to say, with Shohei Otani doing his thing yesterday and, pitching after he put on a clinic at the plate in the first couple games of the series, they held him down a little bit offensively yesterday, but he pitched, wasn't super sharp, but he still limited damage in a big way. But what did we see? If you watched this game, what did you see from Otani? You saw fatigue. You saw him being tired. In fact, after the game, I think it was his manager who just said, "The man is tired," something like that, and asked about what was going on because he had a couple of visits from the catcher and the manager and the pitching coach, because he looked like something was wrong with him, but he was just tired. And not only, there's a good piece by Andrew Baggerly in The Athletic about the Giants' pursuit of Otani in 2017 and how, Bobby Evans, who was the GM at the time, believed that it kind of came down to the National League not having a DH. The Giants were one of 7 finalists for Otani. Every team wanted him. He did not get a big contract. He wanted to just get like a rookie contract. So every team made a huge effort and pitched to sign him, and the Giants advanced to the round of finalists, and they thought they had a good pitch going to him, but they didn't have the DH, and they believed that was a big factor in the decision. So this is my thinking, is that the Giants make a lot of sense in a lot of ways for Otani, but one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I was just thinking watching him yesterday is if you're trying to pitch and hit, right? Everybody, I think the thinking is like it takes so much stamina to be able to do that, especially as you get older. And we're already seeing it. We saw it yesterday. And playing in a hot environment like Anaheim or like, LA with the Dodgers potentially, is that the best place to be exerting so much energy by being a pitcher and a hitter? Or do you start thinking about the cool weather of Northern California and San Francisco potentially being an appeal to a guy who's actively looking exhausted right now playing in the Southern California heat? I just honestly, look, of course, it may not come down to that, but I just wonder after watching him there, if the idea, you could conserve probably a lot of energy over the course of a year by playing a lot of games in cool weather versus all the home games you play in the summer in Southern California being hot, especially day games. And here it's just not like that. And so that possibly could play into their favor. And so we'll see. This is an off-season story, but it's going to be a fascinating one, of course. And we'll just have to wait and see. But I just think that's something to keep in mind. I just hadn't seen him look so exhausted. And he wants to keep doing what he's doing. And so cooler weather is possibly an appeal. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, a mailbag edition of the show. A lot of great questions left over from last time, so I can't wait to get into them. Giants play the Rangers on Friday at 7:15 Pacific. You can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name's Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.